Hi, my name is Max Jeffrey, and I am doing my presentation on Jane Addams. I'm not a techie person, so I apologize. I don't have any PowerPoints or pictures to go along with it. But I decided I was going to start off just kind of talking about all of Jane Addams' main accomplishments, just to kind of get a picture of how amazing of a person she was, and then after kind of getting the big picture, going back and walking through her life to kind of show how she got there and how the timeline works out for all of that. So for starters, she was one of the founders of the Whole House in Chicago, which is kind of a community center on steroids. We'll go into more details on that later, but she was also one of the founders of the National Child Labor Committee. She was the president of the National Conference of Charities and Corrections and was the first woman to be in that position. Two, she was the officer. She was an officer in the National Americans Women's Suffrage Association, also working for women's suffrage in the U.S. She was one of the founders of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP. She was president of the International Congress of Women. She helped found the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and she also served as president of that organization for 10 years. On top of all this, she authored numerous books on a variety of subjects, from her experiences at the Whole House to ethics. And lastly, and probably most importantly, she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for all of her work in 1931, as was the first woman to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. So now we'll kind of get into a little bit more of her life. So she was born on September 6, 1880, in Cedarville, Illinois. Her mother died while she was two, giving birth to one of her siblings, sadly. She was born with a spinal defect that kind of plagued her whole life. She wasn't able to be a very physical person when she was young, and even when she was old. Um, she was hospitalized at multiple times in her life because of her condition. And later, though, she did receive a surgery to be able to relieve some of that pain, but it still didn't make it so that she was able to be fully physically active. Um, Her dad was wealthy, so she kind of grew up wealthy because he owned a mill in the town she was from. And her dad was kind of a popular guy too that she looked up to because he was, one, a Civil War soldier, and two, she was a politician, and he was famous because he was actually friends with Abraham Lincoln. So growing up, Jane Addams was an excellent student. She graduated from Rockford Female Seminary in 1881, and then after graduation, she started studying medicine, thinking that that was the road that she wanted to go down. But that kind of ended up fizzling. One, I think, partially because of an interest factor, and also, two, because she started having some health problems at the time, and that kind of ended that road for her. She ended up going to London with her friend Ellen Gates Starr, and then she worked at a settlement house in London for a little bit, and that was really the beginning of where she started to find her real passion. At that settlement house in London, they were providing services to industrial workers that were low income and otherwise wouldn't be able to have got those services. This was really the beginning of her finding her gift and finding the ways that she was going to be able to give it back to the world. So her and that friend, Ellen Gates Starr, they go back to the States. They go back to Chicago in 1889, and then they found the Whole House. And the Whole House, Hull, Whole House, is her kind of her famous life's accomplishment that she's really well known for and wrote a lot of books on. Um, the Whole House started to expand very rapidly as a community center. Um, Numerous other women ended up joining her cause. Many of those women ended up serving as progressive leaders in the era. and ended up also being well-known leaders. At its height, the Whole House was taking in over 2,000 people a week that were using their services. Many of the women that were serving at the Whole House lived there, and then they provided all kinds of services. They taught kindergarten classes, and they even taught night classes for adults, teaching things like English language to immigrants. They also taught cooking. They taught art. Um, they had a gymnasium. They had an art museum too. It was a very well-rounded facility, and it kind of the goal was to be able to provide services that people weren't going to be able to get anywhere else. Um, Jane Addams really wanted it to be a place where people could express their individuality, especially at a time when the education system was a lot more focused on practicality and a lot more centered around work and teaching people skills that they need to be able to enter the workforce in the world. And she kind of created this place for people to be different, I guess. Um, at the Whole House, the women that lived there, they also were doing investigations while they were providing these types of services too. They were doing investigations into things like child labor laws, disease, substance abuse, amongst other things, all kinds, a whole variety of types of things, of social causes that they wanted to make a difference in. I really wanted to emphasize the importance of the Whole House because it really seems like that institution was a projection of her personality. It was like the embodiment of her into an institution, which was pretty cool. Um, she truly cared about other people, especially the other, and the lesser than, and she really saw the benefits of providing these types of services that people wouldn't get otherwise. Um, the Whole House kind of operated on three basic ethical principles, and she kind of lived her life by the same three principles. One was to teach by example, two was to practice cooperation, and three was to practice social democracy, that is, egalitarian or democratic social relations across class lines. She cared a lot about children, very involved in social causes with children, not only with the labor laws and the rough industrial factories and situations that children were being put in that realm, but also with juvenile crime, because at this time there wasn't a juvenile justice system. She helped found the JPA, which is the Juvenile Protective Association, and that was kind of like the precursor to the juvenile justice system. So it provided probation officers for kids that have been involved in crime rather than just tossing them into jail or doing who knows what with them, you know. So it was like the precursor to the state-operated juvenile justice system. She was obviously an advocate for feminism, not only for women's suffrage, which was a huge part of this era, but also for women to be able to follow their individual passions and as well as be involved in what she referred to as municipal housekeeping. This municipal housekeeping mostly referred to working for like increased public sanitation, increased regulations on food production, because all these things were working to prevent disease. Um, although it seemed like it was common sense for everybody to be working towards these types of causes, that just wasn't a reality at the time, and it almost was different. It was just a different idea because women had to step into a different role, different leadership roles, different roles in society to be able to accomplish these sorts of things. Um, and also a lot of the municipal housekeeping things were based off of investigations that they conducted at the Whole House. She believed in what's called social Christianity, or what she referred to as social Christianity, which really meant that she wanted the church to be more involved in the world and more involved in social causes. She really didn't have any personal, real religious convictions, as far as I could tell, that she really tried to convey heavily. She had some Christian roots, I think, from her childhood, and that played a role in her sense of morality and things like that. Um, but she wasn't an openly uh, strong Christian advocate as a main part of her platform. She was a pacifist, and that was a big part of her beliefs. She argued heavily against the U.S. involvement in World War II, and argued heavily against the U.S. imposing themselves around the world in general. And this is what she was really criticized for in the short term, was her pacifism, because her enemies tended to frame her as being unpatriotic when really she wasn't being unpatriotic. She was just a pacifist, and that was her frame of mind. And unfortunately, not everybody has that frame of mind. But if we did, it'd probably be a lot better world. But her pacifism led to her founding the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and then also becoming the president of that organization for a long time. And then lastly, of course, she was the first woman to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1931. And then sadly, before that, in 1926, she actually had a heart attack, and then from then on, her health was kind of in decline. Never really fully recovered from the heart attack, and then she ended up passing away on May 21st, 1935. Her legacy is really positive. Many believe that she was the greatest and possibly the most accomplished woman of the era. She is still today a feminist icon and an extremely popular historical figure. Um, Her actions have just left a lasting legacy and really has impacted countless organizations that came after her, anywhere from the juvenile justice system to the founding of the United Nations. So that is what I got on Jane Addams. Thanks.